Have you noticed the summer months becoming drier and hotter? The rainy days wetter and longer? Climate change is being felt more at present than in the past decades. Data from the Philippine Weather Bureau, or PAG-ASA, shows that these include increase in daily temperatures, both atmospheric and sea surface, rise in sea level, and change in the frequency and intensity of typhoons, floods, and droughts. The scientific data shows that climate change is not only a major global environmental problem, but is also adversely impacting the Philippines. Natural disasters, exacerbated by climatic changes, are increasing in intensity and are costing the Philippines more in direct losses. From 1970 to 2006, the World Bank and the National Disaster Coordinating Council placed the annual average cost of direct damages at 15 billion pesos. Towards the last quarter of 2009, the country was battered by typhoons Ondoy and Pepeng, with total damage and losses estimated at 206 billion pesos, according to the Post-Disaster Needs Assessment Report of the World Bank. Jerry Velasquez, Senior Regional Coordinator of the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, said that storms stronger than Ondoy and Pepeng will hit the Philippines in the coming years, but the country is one of the least prepared nations in Southeast Asia to cope with natural disasters. At high risk and most vulnerable is the large and fast-growing Philippine population, 85 million as of 2005, and projected to increase to nearly 110 million by 2020. Existing socio-economic stresses, such as poverty, unequal access to and control over resources, food insecurity, trends in economic globalization, internal conflicts, and incidences of diseases will be exacerbated by climate change. Nearly two-thirds of the population, composed of farmers, fishers, indigenous peoples, women and youth, live in rural areas and are heavily dependent on natural resources for their livelihood. Land, water, and coastal areas are sensitive to climate changes, thus affecting the lives and livelihoods of millions of Filipinos. Together with water, the land produces the food that sustains and nurtures us. The Philippine agricultural sector, including forestry and fisheries, accounts for 1/5 of the gross domestic product and employs nearly 4 in every 10 working Filipinos. Though the Philippines has 9.7 million hectares of agricultural areas, the industry is plagued with poor productivity. This causes inadequate food supply and employment opportunities. Many of the younger generation are leaving their farming roots to find work in industrial cities and urban areas. The causes of poor productivity can be linked to rapid land use change and degradation from 3 main factors: kaingin practices, lahar and mud flow coverage of agricultural areas, and land use conversion. Combined with increasing pollution from a growing population and support industries, altered water regimes and increasing risks and susceptibility to natural hazards, it is costing the farmers more to produce the food we eat. Add to this is the changing climate, which affect and are affected by the state of land and water resources. In the central plains of Luzon, rice farmers are directly experiencing the impact of climate change.
Epekto ng pagbabago ng klima. Una, hindi namin alam kung kailan darating yung panahon na tag-ulan. Kami kasi, mayroong cropping pattern na sinusundan. May buwan na dapat nagpupunla, kailan naghahanda ng lupa. Itong buwan na inaasahan namin may mga ulan, walang mga ulan. Pagdating ng first week ng June, dapat nakapagpunla na kami. Ngayon, hindi kami makapagpunla dahil walang ulan. Ibig sabihin yung 45 days na edad ng punla namin, may epekto na yun. Dapat naitatanim na namin. Dahil wala namang patubig, walang irrigation, kailangan magbomba yung gagamit kami ng deep well, dagdag na gastusin pa rin ito. Yung deep well naman, dahil walang mga ulan, lumalalim water table. So kailangan namin uling magbaon uli ng ilang metro ng tubo para maabot ng water table. Dagdag na gastusin na naman para sa amin yan.
On top of all that, climate change may alter the occurrence and severity of pests, leading to crop failure. Other crops are also feeling the impact. In southern Luzon, coconut farmers are experiencing low copra production.
Dahil doon sa sobrang init, namamatay ang karamihang puno ng niyog. Isa pa, lumiliit din ang bunga, humihina ang produksyon ng kopras. Kadalasan kapag sobrang init, talagang mas marami yung namamatay kaysa mag-survive yung niyog.
Forests contain much of the Earth's biodiversity. It provides key services and functions, such as acting as critical watershed areas for soil and water conservation, buffering water flow and weather extremes, climate regulation, supply of raw materials for wood, food, and other products. It also plays an important role in the country's economic and cultural development. Forests used to cover 92% of the Philippines' total land area in the 1500s. Now, it only stands at 24%. This reduction can be attributed to the combined deleterious effects of logging, inadequate forest protection, fires, pests and diseases, incoherent state policies, land conversions, and expansion of upland agriculture.
Nasira ang mga kagubatan dahil sa mga gawa ng tao, pagpuputol ng mga punong kahoy, mga pagtutoroso, yung pagbaba ng lupa, andyan na kaya pagka dumating ang bagyo, nai-erose yung mga lupa, yung bumabagsak doon sa mga ilog, natatabunan ngayon yung mga kanal na daluyan ng tubig. Yan, pag bagyo, ganyan, pati mga puno, umaagos na doon pababara sa mga lupang mas mababa. Hindi niya humaharang na roon sa mga irigasyon, nasisira. Mga kabahayan din.
6 million people are estimated to be residing in upland watersheds of the country, putting an even greater pressure on the natural resource. Watersheds remain to be the principal sources of water for domestic, agriculture, industrial, and power generation purposes. But soil erosion has depleted the replenishment capacity of groundwaters. This reduces the storage capacity of reservoirs, affecting water supplies. Forests not only occur in the uplands, but also in coastal areas. The Philippines contains some of the world's most diverse coastal ecosystems, characterized by mangrove forests, seagrass beds, and extensive coral reefs. These provide the Philippines a sustainable supply of fish, shellfish, seaweeds, and salt. It also protects the shorelines, maintains water quality, sustains biodiversity, transportation, and recreation. The Philippines has the second largest coastline in Asia. The coastal zone is densely populated. 60% of its people live by the coasts. Around 40 million Filipinos depend on seafood as their primary source of protein, and 1.6 million are directly employed by the sector. For the past 5 years, it contributed 4.3% to the national economy, mainly through exports. Thus, the health and economic well-being of Filipinos is acutely tied to the country's coastal and marine ecosystems. But only 5% of coral reefs are still in excellent condition due to destructive fishing practices and coastal zone development. More than 70% of the nation's mangrove forests, essential nursery grounds for reef fish as well as other commercial species of economic and ecological value, have been logged or converted for aquaculture, and half of the seagrass beds have been severely degraded. Now comes climate change.
Sa kasalukuyan ay nararamdaman na nga yung pag-init ng katubigan at ang siguradong magiging epekto nito sa pangisdaan ay ang pagliit ng kita ng maing isda, bunga ng hindi nakakatawid yung mga migrated species na gustong mag-shelter o mangugli.
Una, hindi masyadong hirap manghuli ng mga mangingisda noon dahil kahit na dito lamang sa tabi-tabi marami ang nahuhuling isda. Pero itong mga 1990s na ito, meron ng pagbabago ang ating panahon. Kaya nagsimula noon, patuloy at patuloy pa rin na nakakaranas ng unti-unti na pagliit ng huli ng mga isda.
Other impacts of climate change include increased sea surface temperature leading to coral bleaching, algal blooms, and red tides, and ultimately fish kills. Some marine animals will migrate to cooler seas, leading to reduced fish catch, impacting the livelihoods of marginal fishers.
Napapansin ko ang isda lalong pahinang-pahina na ang huli. Kung minsan naglalaot kaya ang hangin, biglang dumarating na hindi na sa panahon para ito lumakas. At ang ng karagatan ay masyadong tumataas na ang tubig. Napakalakas ang agos o alon at ang palabas ganon din
Sea level rise will bring about saltwater intrusion, affecting potable water and irrigation in coastal zones. It also increases risks from enhanced storm surges and flooding, leading to destruction of mangroves and seagrasses. It also leads to loss of lives, properties and livelihoods, including coastal tourism. The other problem now being recognized is ocean acidification. Oceans act as a sink for carbon dioxide, but too much tips the buffering capacity. The seas are becoming acidic, reducing coral reef and shell formation. As a developing country, our health resources are already stretched. With the effects of climate change on health becoming noticed, we find it as another stressor on top of the present public health challenge that will have to be responded to sooner rather than later.
Talagang malaki ang epekto ng pagbabago ng klima. Unang-una, yung mga kapatid natin na nagtatanim, ihina ang kita, yung kanilang harvest, kukonti yung kanilang kikitain. Magiging sakitin sila dahil hindi masustain yung pagkain. Pag walang gaanong kita, hindi sila maka-assess sa mga basic needs, lalo-lalo ng gamot, sakit.
The effects of climate change on health are both direct and indirect. Direct effects will come from the frequency and severity of extreme climatic events such as heat strokes and dehydration from increasing temperatures, heat waves and drought. Deaths from flooding, typhoons, and storm surges.
Yung tatay ko, nung isang araw, inumpain ko sa siga. Nagsobrang 200 na nga yata yun. Tapos salangkaw pa yung over. Sabi ng doktor, sobrang init.
Tag-init na naman. Mga sakit tulad ng tikdas, ubo, na mahirap ma-prevent. Dahil nga sa minsan yung mga nanay, pinapabayaan lang yung mga anak nila.
Indirect effects will be from changes in the climate that may alter the life cycles of viruses and germs, which in turn will alter the expressions of vector-borne diseases such as dengue, malaria, and leptospirosis. Studies show the number of dengue and malaria cases increase as temperature increases. Leptospirosis cases increase when there's a high volume of rainfall, as experienced in Metro Manila after Typhoon Ondoy. Climate change and its effects are here with us. The challenge, therefore, is to build the capacity of vulnerable communities and sectors to cope with its impact through various adaptation and mitigation measures. But we are not starting from scratch. There are already pockets of adaptation measures being implemented both locally and within national plans and policies. Farmers and their families are doing the following as adaptation measures: engaging in sustainable agriculture, diversified and integrated farming, organic agriculture and planting of climate-resilient crop varieties, contour farming in upland areas to arrest soil erosion.
Ginagawa namin sa ngayon, adaptation sa mitigation, hindi lang yung nakatuon sa palay. Diversified integrated farming na yung ginagawa namin. Hindi siya 100% palay. May baboyan, may gulayan, may manukan. Nag-a-adjust na kami, hindi na kami nagtatanim nung pangmatagalan na 120 days, 125 days. Ang ginagamit namin variety ngayon ng palay ay yung 90 days na lang. Sa mga kapwa namin magsasaka, sinasabi namin sa kanila yung pinagmumulan ng climate change. Ano yung contribution ng chemical farming, binabahagi namin sa kanila. Sasabi namin na pagdating ng anihan, huwag nang magsusunog ng mga dayami kasi isa sa mga dahilan to yung carbon dioxide.
Enhanced planting techniques are also being practiced. The system of rice intensification, or SRI, is a documented planting method that uses significantly less water than the traditional rice farming practice. Another way to conserve water is by establishing rainwater harvesting structures and small water impounding projects to serve as reservoirs of excess water during the rainy season. Irrigation systems are also being improved through rehabilitation and restoration. Controlled irrigation technology improves water management.
Sa mga irrigation naman, ayusin nila yung mga kanal. Kung makikita natin ang mga kanal ngayon, ang papangit ng kanal, daming tumatagas na tubig na sayang. Kung napupunta sa magsasakayan, malaking tulong yan.
Post-harvest facilities are also being distributed to minimize losses and handle surplus in production. Critical watersheds for irrigation are being reforested.
Nagbala kami mag-asawa na magtanim ng maraming kahoy. Basta ngayon, meron na kami doon na malaki ng mga ipi-ipi.
Other measures adopted by communities across the country are reforestation and rehabilitation of open and degraded grasslands, establishment of agroforestry farms, encouraging upland farmers to shift from kaingin and illegal logging, and empowering steward communities as long-term managers through the community-based forest management agreements. Communities across ecosystems are encouraged to plant trees and other vegetation. The more green plants there are, the better for us and for the planet, as they act as carbon sinks, reducing the carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere. A number of municipalities are already implementing climate-resilient coastal resource management practices. These are preventing more mangroves being converted to fish ponds, mangrove reforestation for shoreline stabilization, and protection from storm surges and floods, deputization of Pantay Dagat to monitor and apprehend illegal fishers, coastal cleanup, and establishment and management of marine reserves and fish sanctuaries, critical for habitat biodiversity and fish breeding.
Ang ginagawa natin sa kasalukuyan ay tinitipon natin yung mga mangingisda at tinibigyan natin ng mga pag-aaral tungkol dito sa climate change at ini-involve natin sila sa mga ganitong gawain katulad ng CRM. Pangunahin na nga yung pagtatanim natin ng bakawan dahil naniniwala tayo sa bawat puno na ating itatanim sa ating paligid ay makakagamit ito ng carbon dioxide na siyang nagpapainit at nagpapalala ng ating klima.
Tinatanim ngayon na kasalukuyan ng mga estudyante at saka ng mga taga rito. Dahil sa pag-upa ng klima nga natin, patuloy kaming nagbabantay, hindi lang sa mga illegal fishing. Tumutulong na rin kami magtanim at pakudan itong mga bakawan nandito.
Isa pa nga dun sa components ng coastal resource management yung ating fish sanctuary.
Ang kahalaga ng fish sanctuary ay napalaking bagay sa mga magdaragat. Kasi ito po ang laruan at pangitlugan ng mga isda na siyang nagbibigay ng kabuhayan sa mga magdaragat. Kami nagpapatrolya para mapangalagaan at maprotektahan itong fish sanctuary na ito.
Some LGUs are already supporting these community-based initiatives through the passage of enabling ordinances.
Patuloy at patuloy pa rin na nakikipag-ugnayan sa lokal na pamahalaan at sa iba pang mga ahensya.
The Department of Health, together with the LGUs and private healthcare providers, should take the lead in disease surveillance and management of epidemics. While efforts are being undertaken by LGUs, these have to be complemented by community-based health initiatives.
Ang ginagawa namin, magkakaroon kami ng pagbahay-bahay para paalam sa mga nanay na dapat yung mga bata, sabihan na huwag maglalabas dahil ang klima ngayon, mabuti na yung mag-prevent kaysa maggamot.
Further adaptive strategies are education and awareness, surveillance, early alert systems and disease control, disaster preparedness, and collaborative efforts with other agencies and health services groups. Although there are many examples of adaptation projects already existing in the Philippines, there are still underlying gaps, needs, and constraints in producing climate-resilient communities. Climate observation, high-resolution information regarding future climate, cost-benefit analysis of adaptation measures, crop diversification, silviculture practices, climate-adapted species selection and breeding, coupled ocean-atmosphere watershed modeling, predictive capability for sea level rise, early warning systems, data access, sharing and exchanges, improved coordination of various sectors and institutions, creating synergies between scientific and local knowledge, increase institutional capacity for climate change adaptation, develop more responsive institutions sensitive and supportive of the local needs and priorities, increase local capacity to compete with global products, technical support for food security, climate and disaster risk sensitive land use planning, comprehensive monitoring systems, build the different capital assets of local communities, secure land and natural resources tenure and property rights, strengthen community-based strategies, grants, not loans, for adaptation measures, enabling mechanisms for private-public partnerships, private sector investments, risk transfer mechanisms including microinsurance, best practices scale-up and replication for climate-resilient communities, wide-scale IEC.
Amin hihiling sa pamahalaan, lalo sa lokal na pamahalaan. Tuloy-tuloy sana yung mga proyektong ganito dahil ang samahan naman ng mangingisda ay tuloy-tuloy lang na nagmamalasakit, tuloy-tuloy lang na gumagampan dito sa gawa, mga aktibidad na nagaya nga nitong mangrove reforestation, sanctuary establishment, mga pagpapatrolya sa dagat, yung law enforcement natin.
Ang unang-una nga, nakikipag-ugnayan kami sa lokal na pamahalaan para matulungan yung mga maliliit ng mangingisda.
The Philippines needs to push the promotion of effectiveness of tools and mechanisms for technology cooperation, including the removal of barriers to promoting technology transfer, such as financing, intellectual property rights, capacity building, ways to accelerate deployment, diffusion and transfer of technologies, and encourage cooperation on research and development.
Pangunahin sana na ang pamahalaan ang siyang nagbibigay ng edukasyon o yung impormasyon sa epekto ng climate change.
Ang malaking bahagi ng magagawa ng hindi lamang ng pamahalaan kundi pati na rin ng ating komunidad dapat ay magkaroon ng pagkakaisa. Mahirap paunawa sa mga tao yung pagbabago ng ating panahon. Ang malaking magagawa natin dyan at para solusyon, ayun nga, maaaring magkaroon tayo ng mga lawakang kampanya sa pagkamulat dyan sa pangangalaga ng ating environment.